Thank you very much. This was pretty practice-based, was what we've heard so far, and maybe a sense of introduction. First of all, thanks for being invited. I really enjoy having the opportunity to talk here. I'm an academic philosopher working, among other things, in ethics and applied ethics. And so I will try and really go into some concepts and theories and try and have a conversation about these. This, by the way, is the Assembly Hall, the historic Assembly Hall of the Austrian Parliament. As I've promised, I'll dig into philosophy, and I thought when we're talking about TG, like technology governance, I think this Nietzsche quotation isn't too bad after all. He said in 1889, "Our institutions are of no good. We are unanimous about this, but this is not due to them, but to us." Of course, he meant like Christianity, church, and so on. But I think it's quite a telling quotation. So what I will do very briefly, I know that time is limited, an inquiry in 9 steps. I'll speak about the concept of ethics, TA, technology governance, which I don't think is a new paradigm to answer this question straight away, but it's a challenge for ethics. One possible implication may be a further moralization of politics, question mark. Another one might be a further politicization of ethics. And then I will go over and ask what RRI means in this context, ask for the semantics and normative foundations, which I think has been done a bit too little in this conference, but which obviously I'm most interested in some sense. And then I'll ask for the integration of ethics in or into RRI. One is the result and the other is the process. Okay, for those who want to fall asleep straight away, these are the basic tenets of my talk. Ethics has a fragile but stable status within TA. This is what I perceive to be. In a classical text that many of you know probably, it has been called a difficult relationship. Technology governance, furthermore I will say TG, comes as a new challenge for ethics and its role in TA and TG respectively. And my ultimate claim is that TG implies RRI implies ethics. The key questions I will, not try and answer, but raise. What does a TG conception of TA mean for ethics within TA? Are there slippery slopes like aestheticization, politicization, difficult words? Is that slippery slopes or just old wine and new skins? How can and should ethics be integrated in TG and RRI? What do I mean by ethics? My conceptual claim is it refers to an academic discipline, like the one I'm doing, offering an expertise which is both substantially and methodologically special in kind. In scientific classifications, it's now become usual to speak about value theory. So we really, like Descartes, we sit at the fireplace or in the armchair and do non-empirical work on concepts and theories, yes. But we also try and do ethics and application. And this is concerned with what I've tried to put together in a comprehensive analysis of the evaluative implications of some given, and that is actual or potential perspective, technology, social technological innovation. This stance that I'm taking here implies a rejection of other possible stances on ethics. I'll not go into this, but yes, there is room for discussion and disagreement. TA, this is the classical picture. It's linear, it's more and more upstream. There's all this discussion, the old-fashioned discussion on Coaling Ridge, and is there a right time and point in time when to do TA? And ethics within TA comes in and asks or examines the axiological and normative bases and ask questions. And in my view, in the 1990s, there was this big divide, the cleavage, the sociologists were fighting the ethicists and vice versa. I think actually there are a lot of bridges between the two, and anyone who really, in my view, wants to do ethics should do this empirically informed, and really, in fact, ethicists rely a lot on social scientists and all the research they are doing, because we can't. So there's really a big division of labor, and in my opinion, there's no point, no pomme de discord, no apple of discord, really. We've all got our tasks to do. So from an ethics point of view, for instance, inquiry into potential public acceptance, that is, in a sense, part of side effects of some social technological innovation. But strictly speaking, it's not ethics in TA because we don't work empirically, but that's for the social scientists, and we sort of try and work with their outcomes. Now, what's TG all about? This is like old to Athens. I'm not the expert. I try to figure out. It's not this linear model anymore. It's I chose the term ecological, but maybe you would reject that and stick with the network model, which is sort of the usual wording to refer to TG. At least it's non-linear. It's about the interplay of all sorts of stakeholders, different actors, and I mean, a stakeholder is an actor that has been identified as relevant for the question or the field in question. It's multi-level cooperation, coordination. It's still regulatory in some sense, but it's sort of including private regulation. It has a normative, and that's important for an ethicist, it has a normative and a descriptive perspective. And this has been highlighted in several publications by our chair, which I think is very important. I quote Brüchler in German. Erstens, ein normativer Begriff, der besseres Regieren im Bereich der Technikpolitik verspricht. Zweitens, die analytische Verwendung. TG as an analytical tool, and both it's better governance, the normative goal of better governance, and this has to do with the nature right at the start that our institutions somehow are not as good as we wish them to be anymore, and it's also an analytical tool. I chose this tree model, and it's all these speech bubbles. They are all of a different color, of a different shape, of a different size, and maybe this can sort of visualize what maybe TG is about. I don't think it's a new paradigm in the Kuhnian sense, because it's compatible with what has been done before. Conversation between government and the ancient or the old perspectives and governance is possible, and I think a paradigm means that really it's something completely new with new terminology, etc., etc. But it shifts the focus or the perspective, and it's not so much risk assessment, say, from the armchair or ex cathedra, as we would say. It's more investigating the intuitions, the pre-reflective moral responses by various actors and stakeholders in the field that have been identified by certain criteria. And for academic or professional ethics, this actually is a challenge. Ethics is sort of finds itself reduced to one actor in this multitude of other actors that are now playing a big role, and what should it do, academic ethics? And for me, that's a real question. It is sort of menaced by being ignored in a TG perspective, more than in a sort of traditional linear technology assessment context. At least this is sort of one possible outcome. One example for this, and this sort of goes back to the 1990s debates on risk assessment, where ethics often came up with judgments on the irrationality of some risk perceptions, and now how to integrate the role of emotions. And this is what is more in the foreground, I think, with TG, when actually actors say what they think is problematic. You think it's an old-fashioned example, GMO, but it's not. This is just a couple of days ago in the Hastings Center Bioethics Forum, a blog that I can recommend, and it's a case on GM mosquitoes in Key West in Florida to fight dengue fever. This is very well written, so I recommend this to you, and it's still posing the old questions how rational scientific analyses and completely different risk perceptions go together, and emotions, what role for emotions. Does this mean that there's a further moralization of politics? And it's important, and here I'm pretty much with Grunwald in 2013, where he has distinguished Ethisierung and Moralisierung, ethicization and moralization. Like ethicization or ethics, how I understand it, is reflective ethical knowledge, introduced by professional ethicists and similar actors into the public debate. And moralization, this is our own individual moral pre-reflective intuitions, and these also, and that might actually be an impact of TG, has to be discussed, these are also voiced in the public sphere, even more so with TG, as I've said. But both of these arguments are completely factual. They are slippery slope arguments, and you all know how difficult they are actually to substantiate, and we need a lot of evidence that there is perhaps further moralization. So these, in fact, are open questions, and still, and Grunwald has stressed this, the aim of classical ethics is still at ethical education. He even took the term Aufklärung, enlightenment, with all this implies. And how can this sort of perceived cleavage between TA understood as TG or within TG and ethics and sort of traditional model, how can this be overcome? An example, there has been this famous ethics commission for a safe energy supply in this country, which apparently has played some role in the decision-making process of our chancellor towards energy transition. I don't know. It's been highly debated, but there in the newspapers it was said, yeah, this is some further moralization because there are so many Christian stakeholders in this commission. And they even said here that the journalists, they asked, what does Christian belief have to do with nuclear power? And one of the answers was a biblical command. So this, for me, yes, it is an example of moralization. Politicization, what do I mean by that? It's a possible stance taken by academic or professional ethicists faced with the TG challenge. As I've said, they fear that their voice will be lost. What could they do? And this fear is even more important since we have been, well, not only recently, but we know that there are framing effects, and those who are perhaps the loudest in the public debate, they will be heard. Maybe by politicians and other important people. So what should ethicists do? We know that there is framing in the sense of bounded rationality, but there's also framing in a very general sense, and this by some colleagues who might actually be in the room, I don't know, from Torgerson, Bogner and Kastenhofer from the Austrian ITA Institute. They really said that yes, it's agenda-setting framing. They had this article, The Power of Framing and Technology Governance, and this is sort of tacit discursive framing. Who comes on the agenda? So does politicization mean further ethicization? This is now a real conceptual hodgepodge, I know. I think this is an open question. What do I mean by ethicization? An active part being played by ethics. And maybe, yes, maybe that's what ethicists should do, become proactive in policy counseling, get out of academia, get out of the ivory tower. Maybe this is even a good idea that should be intentionally pursued by ethicists. Maybe it's even practically necessary. How does RRI come in? I repeated the central question of this panel. My working hypothesis would be a governance approach allows for participation and accountability of different actors in research and innovation. I think this is, and this is the ever-quoted von Schomburg citation, the definition of RRA, and I think this is pretty much which is in there, although, and this is a claim I'd like to raise, the semantics and the implicit normative foundations of RRA really need to be clarified. This is all too vague, and of course it's a political compromise. It's a concept that a lot of people have to be able to work with, so this is perhaps necessary. How could ethics be integrated into RRI? We've heard something in the first talk on the meso level and different levels. I've got a different proposal to make. At a macro level, perhaps it's TG as a possible sort of self-regulatory model. And then RRI would be one way of spelling out TG, not the only possible one, but perhaps the most plausible one. And then at the micro level, there's still a lot to do for professional ethics, for other stakeholders as well. So this is sort of the multi-voiced choir that there is, and that RRI sort of intends to look at. So ethics is still at the core of what needs to be undertaken when RRI is aimed at, even in an informal TG model. And this is not a really sound conceptual syllogism, but I said, like, premise A, TG is in a specific sense implemented by RRI. Premise B, RI is in a specific sense reliant on ethics within TA. So C, conclusion, TG implies RI implies ethics, that is ethics within TA. And it's clear that this is a normative argument, it's not a factual description of what is going on, but I think it's compatible with what is going on, and it leaves room for ethics within the new developments of RRI and TG and TA in TG. So even maybe ethics within TA aims at TG. That's an open question, because ethics, how I understand this, is really reliant on surveys of pre-reflective moral intuitions. I'm a pragmatist, I'm not a Kantian in the sense. So ethical TA has been demanded in quite long ago in a paper, the case for ethical TA. So that would have been TA within TG, even avant la lettre, before TG was on the agenda. And maybe the politicization of ethics in this respect is necessary. A last sentence on what I perceive the real and unsolved, well, not the only, but some unsolved problems of TG in general, of any governance model, and that's really power relations in the background, and how can we how about the accountability and responsibility if there's more and more private actors, less state-governed regulation, state-oriented policy making? So how actually do we get across this? And of course, this is for ethicists, responsibility questions are really at the core. So these are open questions, and I thank you very much.
Okay.